Now, as we can see, uh, the Union Territory is contained under Part 8 of the Indian Constitution. So it is administered directly by the center. And how is the Union Territory directly administered by the center? We will learn about that today. And various other features of the Union Territory. What are Union Territories? Union Territories are special administrative units that are directly governed by the central government of India, unlike states which have their own elected governments and autonomy. These are special administrative units, okay, that are directly controlled by the central government. Every union territory, I repeat, every union territory is controlled by the central government. We have certain union territories that have legislative assembly, but still they answer to the president, okay? They answer to the president, unlike states, in which the head of the executive, the formal head of the executive is the governor, and the real head of the executive is the chief minister. But in the Union Territory, the real and then the nominal head of the executive is the president. Okay, it is directly controlled by the center. Why is it controlled by the center? It mainly has to do with security. Okay, it's usually union territories are situated in places where it's politically very sensitive. We have the Delhi, which is the capital of India, and then we have Puducherry, right, which is in a coastal area. We have the Andaman and Nicobar Islands and so forth. So it was necessary for the center to directly control these territories, which is why they called it Union Territory. The term itself, Union Territory. So these are governed directly by the Union government. It is administered by the president through an administrator. Okay, administrator. Now, two terms are used for, let's say, the head, the administrator. Number one is the administrator, and number two is the lieutenant governor. Okay, these are the two titles used. But in the Constitution, only the administrator is mentioned. So anytime you read about the word administrator, it also includes the lieutenant governor. Okay, always remember that in the Constitution, it is explicitly mentioned that the union territories are administered by the president through an administrator. But in reality, through either an administrator or lieutenant governor. So it was created for strategic, cultural, or administrative reasons. For administrative convenience, and for administrative reasons like Andaman and Nicobar is a little too far with less population maybe, so the center decided to control it entirely. That could be the reason. There are various reasons, okay? Why were union territories created? We'll dig deeper. For political and administrative reasons. I hope it's visible. Why were union territories created? Number one, for political and administrative reasons. Areas needing direct central control for effective governance. Now you understand that. And second, strategic importance, border and defense sensitive regions of national interest, Andaman and Nicobar Islands being one example, Daman and Diu as well, Lakshadweep as well. So cultural distinctiveness, unique cultural or ethnic identity requiring protection. Andaman and Nicobar Island has a very unique cultural and ethnic identity. So they needed protection. You can research on that. These are tribal communities that have been living in a very different type of cultural orientation. So they needed protection from the central government, and that is one of the reasons mentioned by the central government as to why Andaman and Nicobar Island was considered a union territory in the first place. Geopolitical transition, territories transitioning from colonial or princely rule. We talked about Lakshadweep, right? We talked about Puducherry, the official language still being French for Puducherry, and so geopolitical transition. Small size and resources, like I mentioned, Andaman and Nicobar Island, the population is a little too small, right, for them to have their own legislative assembly and so forth. Okay, so these are the 5 reasons that you can use in your mains examination in case they ask you why union territories were created. Okay, examples, Delhi, Ladakh, and so forth. We'll learn about that. Now, if you look at the administration of the union territories, the president appoints an administrator. Okay, the administrator is very similar to the governor. of the state. Okay, it's very similar to the governor of the state. Then the administrator will administer the union territory in the name of the president. The administrator has no right to, do this and that without the approval of the president. He's just a representative of the president. Now we have every union territory is administered by the president. Okay, the administrator or lieutenant governor acts as the president's agent. Now here I've mentioned administrator and lieutenant governor, but do not forget the only term used in the Indian Constitution is administrator. So don't be confused. Okay, the governor of a neighboring state may be appointed administrator. Sometimes that's the case. We will learn about that later on. Now, okay, so I think there's a mismatch with the slide. So in Delhi, we can see that Delhi has Lieutenant Governor as the head, Puducherry, Jammu and Kashmir, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Ladakh, Lieutenant Governor, and then we have Chandigarh, Datra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu, Administrator, Lakshadweep, Administrator. Okay. Next, we'll begin with the first article of Part 8 of the Indian Constitution, Article 239A. So, Article 239A was initially added by the 14th Constitutional Amendment Act 1962. It empowers Parliament to create a legislature and or Council of Ministers for certain union territories. Now, if you guys remember, I discussed with you guys about Puducherry being under the French, right? It was taken over from the French in the year 1962. So once it was taken over, the central government enacted this Article 239A that empowered the Parliament to create a legislature, currently applicable only to Puducherry. Okay, currently applicable only to Puducherry. Article 239A is applicable only to Puducherry. Here's the confusion. Delhi has a legislative assembly. Jammu Kashmir has a legislative assembly. But why this article alone empowers Parliament to create a legislature only for Puducherry? Okay. Do not get confused. There are other laws for Delhi as well as Jammu Kashmir, but for this alone, for 239A, it is specifically only for Puducherry. And we have the National Capital Territory of Delhi. The 69th Amendment 1991. The 69th Amendment 1991 created National Capital Territory of Delhi. Back then it was only known as Delhi. Okay, it was the 69th Amendment 1991 that gave Delhi the title National Capital Territory of Delhi, and it was renamed as NCT of Delhi, and the Lieutenant Governor became the head, and then they also got a legislative assembly. They got a legislative assembly, and then they also, with the legislative assembly came automatically the chief minister and the council of ministers. Okay, so after they got the NCT of Delhi, they got the legislative assembly, and they also got the chief minister. So even though they got the legislative assembly, just like the states, they were not given three subjects. Okay, the assembly cannot legislate on public order, police, and land. These are the three subjects that the Legislative Assembly of Delhi is not allowed to legislate on. It's very important to understand the functioning of our capital, right? So these are the three subjects that you must understand. And a very important note, the Parliament retains legislative supremacy over all matters for Delhi. Legislative supremacy, which means in the state, every time a law is introduced, every time a bill becomes an act, the sole power rests in the hands of the state government. We have the state list, we have the union list, right? But here, every legislative act, the parliament is the last deciding factor. Okay, unlike the states, the Indian Parliament can easily remove any kind of legislative action taken by the Legislative Assembly of Delhi. So it is directly under the control of the central government, technically. But Legislative Assembly was created for convenience, for administrative reasons. but they do not hold power as much as rest of the states do. Always remember, Delhi is directly under the control of the union government. Okay. So this is a brief history about Delhi. In 1950, it was part of the Part C state, Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D, right? Part C state, and then in 1952, it got its first legislative assembly, and in 1956, it became a union territory under the State Reorganization Act, which we studied, 1956, okay? And the State Reorganization Act, Delhi became a union territory, and it got its own legislative assembly. Now, in 1966, Delhi Administration Act, a Delhi Metropolitan Council was created, which was later on abolished. Okay, and also in the year 1991, the 69th Amendment of 1991 officially created the Legislative Assembly of Delhi in the year 1993. It was removed. Okay, the 1956, when Delhi became a union territory, it has its legislative assembly, but eventually it was removed, and only in the year 1993 it came back, okay, with new functions and powers. So the new version of Legislative Assembly of Delhi was created in the year 1993. The old version was created in the year 1956. Okay. Now, important developments in Delhi. These are the two important developments in Delhi right now. Okay, this is a very heated topic. In 2021, GNCTC, Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi Act. Okay, it's called GNCTT Act 2021. It's part of the current affairs which I've added. It recognized the Lieutenant Governor as the government in Delhi. It clarified, okay, executive actions require prior communication to the Lieutenant Governor. Executive actions of the Legislative Assembly of Delhi will require prior communication to the Lieutenant Governor. Okay, that was during the Chief Ministership of Arvind Kejriwal, the leader of the Aam Aadmi Party. So, tayo PGP laga support no huido. So, all of check korala type ekta to act thakiside against Arvind Kejriwal, the Chief Minister of Delhi, who was the leader of Aam Aadmi Party, and then who was against the BJP government, still is against the BJP government. So another act was enacted in 2023, the GNCTT Amendment. It established the National Capital Civil Services Authority. Again, NCCSA was established, and it handles the transfer and postings of Delhi officers. Back then, it was a portfolio under the Legislative Assembly, but they even took away that power. So IS officers, police, tower officers can be to NCCSA la under the IGC. Now who controls NCCSA? Modi ji, right? So it took away the power of Arvind Kejriwal in relation to transfer and posting of officers, and they created a new authority, National Capital Civil Service Authority, which now handles the transfer and postings of Delhi officers. The power as excessively lucid. So these are the two important developments in Delhi. I think they likely ask these two acts, okay, in the preliminary examination. They might. It has a very high chance. Now, suspension and ordinance making power. Now we are done with Article 239A. Let's move to 239AB. Article 239AB simply empowers the President to suspend the operation of Article 239AA in case of constitutional machinery in Delhi. Okay? Article 239AA, which is I'll show you. It's in the next slide. We'll study that in the next slide. It empowers the President to suspend the operation of Article 239A. Article 239A is related to the functioning of the Delhi. So in case of constitutional machinery in Delhi, it will suspend the operation of Article 239AA, okay, which was inserted by the '69 Amendment 1991. Article 239AA was inserted by the '69 Amendment 1991, which gave Delhi the status of national capital of territory, as well as inserted Article 239 AA inside the Indian Constitution, which entails the powers and functions of the Delhi government. Now, in Article 239 AB, the president is empowered to suspend the operation of Article 239 AA in case of failure of constitutional machinery in Delhi. And in Article 239B, okay, it empowers the administrator of Puducherry to promulgate ordinance during recess of the legislature with prior approval of the president. Only for Puducherry, the administrator of Puducherry can promulgate ordinance. The rest of the union territory, they have a very different power, which we will learn about that later. So, ordinance promulgation, we learn about that with regards to the president as well as the governor. The president can also promulgate ordinance. The governor can also promulgate ordinance. Okay, and that ordinance is equal to the act of the parliament, act of the state, right? And once they enact this ordinance, once they enact this act, it will remain in force. It will continue to remain in force for not more than 6 months. And before 6 months, once Legislative Assembly or Lok Sabha, once they reconvene, they will have to approve that ordinance within 6 weeks after its reassembly. Ek bar pek aha biside government form aha biside 6 weeks de udo ordinance to approve kura lagi. If not, the ordinance will cease to exist. So we talked about that yesterday. It's the same with the administrator of Puducherry. Okay, he can promulgate ordinance during the absence of the legislature. Election law na nulibi kiba to huise na cases kan the administrator ba ordinance promulgate kuro pare with prior approval of the president. Now this ordinance, once the legislative assembly is reassembled, they need to approve that ordinance within 6 weeks. If they don't, the ordinance will cease to exist. And if they approve it, then it will go on for 6 months, a maximum of 6 months. So ordinance process under Article 239B for Puducherry includes assembly in recess. Assembly recess there's a nai. President approves the ordinance, and once the assembly meets, it expires after 6 weeks unless approved. Okay. Now we have Article 240. The president may make regulations for peace, progress, and good governance of certain union territories. Such regulations carry the same force as an act of parliament. So it's very similar to ordinance, okay? But for other states, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep, Datra and Nagar Haveli, and Daman and Diu, and Ladakh. These 4 union territories will, in these 4 union territories, the president makes regulations, okay? President's regulation making power in a way. It's very similar to ordinance. Such regulations carry the same force as an act of parliament. So what is different from the ordinance making power and president's regulation making power? The only difference is that when it comes to ordinance, the assembly needs to approve it. But here, the assembly the president doesn't need the assembly's approval. Kiman jawa bare. Okay, the president has full power here. It doesn't need the approval of anything, so it makes regulation for the peace, progress, and good governance of these 4 union territories. And why not Delhi? Why not Delhi? Why not Jammu and Kashmir? Because they have their own legislative assembly. And these 4, they do not have their own legislative assembly. It is directly under the control of the president. So he has the power. Okay, so Chandigarh is very special. Chandigarh is excluded. You just need to know that the Chandigarh is excluded. There's no specific reason given by the Indian Constitution, but the Union Territory of Chandigarh is not covered under Article 240, either under Article 240 or 239B. Chandigarh is the only one that we can't find a reason for. Okay, but Chandigarh was excluded. Maybe because it's very unique in the sense that it's a metropolitan city, and then usually Chandigarh's lieutenant governor is the governor of Punjab. Ina thake de. So uto ekta disputed area ase. So they did not do anything they did not give the president the regulation making power in the Union Territory of Chandigarh. So the Union Territory that's excluded from Article 240, if they ask you, is Chandigarh. Okay, no specific reason has been given. Now, high courts for Union Territories. These are the high courts for Union Territories. The Parliament may establish high courts for Union Territories, which is obvious, or extend jurisdiction of neighboring high court states. So just in the same way we talked about the Kohima High Court, we do not have our own High Court. We have the Guwahati High Court, and the Guwahati High Court la Guwahati bench, Kohima bench, Kohima de located ase. So just in the same way, every Union Territory, Delhi is the only Union Territory that has a High Court of its own. Another prelims facts, Delhi is the only Union Territory that has a High Court of its own. Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, they have a common High Court of Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh, right? And then Andaman and Nicobar Island, controlled by Calcutta High Court. Puducherry, Madras High Court. Madras, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, you understand? Madras High Court. Lakshadweep, Kerala High Court. Chandigarh, Punjab and Haryana High Court. Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu, Bombay High Court in Mumbai. Okay? So you can go through it after the class session. Now, these are the present Union Territories. Delhi has a legislature. Puducherry has a legislature. Jammu Kashmir has a legislature. Okay? These are the three territories that has a legislature. And if you can see part serial number 4, serial number 5, serial number 7, serial number 8. These are included here. President's regulation making power. Why? Because they do not have a legislative assembly. Which Union territories are excluded? The three, right? Delhi, Puducherry, Jammu and Kashmir. Why? These three have their own legislative assembly. Okay. So, administrator, the first 5, lieutenant governor, 6, 7, and 8, administrator. Now, administrator versus governor. Agent of the president, constitutional head of the state, heads a union territory. The administrator will head a union territory. The governor will head a state. The administrator represents the union government. And although the governor represents the union government, he acts on the advice of the council of ministers, whereas the administrator will act on the advice of the president. Okay? Administrator is appointed by the president, governor is appointed by the president. Administrator has no independent authority. All actions are taken in the name of the president, whereas the governor has constitutional discretion. We talked about the different ways in which he has discretion. Now, articles at a glance, you can go through it once you go back home. These are the key points to remember. That's all about union territories. There's nothing much to learn about union territories. Key points to remember: there are 8 union territories in India. 3 union territories have a legislature: Delhi, Puducherry, and Jammu Kashmir. Delhi Assembly cannot legislate on public order, police, and land. These are very important points. Okay, and administrator is not equal to governor. Different roles and power. And Article 240 covers only Andaman, Nicobar Island, Lakshadweep, Daman and Diu, and Dadra and Nagar Haveli, and Ladakh. Okay, these are the 4 union territories covered under Article 240, which is the president's power, okay, to make laws for the union territory. And for the ordinance, only Puducherry. Okay, so you remember all that. Article 242 stands repealed. Out of this article, Article 242 stands repealed. Okay, it's no longer in existence. It was specifically related to Cork. So we have come to the end of the session for union territories. We'll have a 2-minute break. Okay.